Captain Han Sol stood on the bridge of the New Sol and watched three massive ships appear from nowhere. The ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. They looked like floating cities made of metal and strange lights. Han Sol had been waiting for this moment his whole life, but now that it was here, he felt very small. The first ship looked like a giant crystal that twisted in ways that hurt to look at. The second ship was black metal covered in spikes and red lights. The third ship seemed to be made of flowing liquid that never stopped moving. These were the first aliens that humans would ever meet face to face. Ambassador Yu Jin walked onto the bridge wearing her best diplomatic uniform. She had studied alien languages for 20 years but had never thought she would actually use them. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to hide it. Behind her walked Dr. Mi Rei, who carried medical equipment, and Daeho, who was the best engineer on the ship. The communication system made a strange sound, and then voices filled the bridge. The first voice was high and musical like wind chimes. The second voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. The third voice sounded like water flowing over stones. Each voice spoke in perfect human language, which was both amazing and frightening. The crystal ship spoke first and said they were the Velthari Empire from the far side of the galaxy. The black ship said they were the Krex Dominion and had conquered 1,000 worlds. The liquid ship said they were the Nexus Collective, and their minds were linked across space and time. All three ships said they had come to meet the humans, who had just learned to travel between stars. Han Sol tried to sound brave when he spoke back to them. He welcomed them to human space and invited them to board the New Sol for a meeting. The aliens agreed but said they would send only small groups. Yu Jin felt relieved because she was not ready to meet thousands of aliens at once. The docking bay filled with strange sounds as the alien ships connected to the New Sol. The first aliens to come aboard looked nothing like humans. The Velthari were tall and thin with skin that looked like glass. They moved like dancers and their eyes were completely black. The Krex looked like giant lizards walking on two legs with thick armor covering their bodies. The Nexus aliens were the strangest because they seemed to be made of the same flowing liquid as their ship. Yu Jin met them in the main conference room, which had been decorated with flowers from Earth. She had thought the flowers would make the room feel more welcoming. The aliens stared at the flowers for a long time before sitting down. Their translators made soft beeping sounds as they converted alien thoughts into human words. The meeting started well enough. Yu Jin explained about human civilization and how they had built their first faster-than-light ship only 5 years ago. The aliens shared basic information about their own empires. But Yu Jin noticed something strange. Every time she smiled or made a friendly gesture, the aliens would look at each other with what seemed like confusion. When the meeting broke for food, Han Sol had ordered the kitchen to prepare a feast. The human crew brought out dishes from many countries on Earth. Daeho noticed that one of the Velthari delegates looked sick. The alien was swaying and its glass-like skin had turned a pale blue color. Without thinking, Daeho rushed over to help. He put his arm around the alien to steady it and asked if it needed medical attention. The alien felt cold and smooth like touching ice. Dr. Mi Rei came running with her medical scanner to check if the alien was hurt. The moment Daeho touched the Velthari, something incredible happened. All the aliens in the room stopped talking. They stared at Daeho with their strange eyes wide open. The Krex delegate made a sound like a roar, but quieter. The Nexus alien started flowing faster like excited water. The sick Velthari looked up at Daeho and spoke in its musical voice. It said that Daeho had helped without being asked and without wanting anything in return. The alien sounded amazed, like it had seen something impossible. Dr. Mi Rei scanned the alien and found that its body was having trouble with Earth's atmosphere, but it was not seriously hurt. Daeho helped the alien to a chair and brought it some water. He told the alien to rest and said the humans would adjust the air in the room to make it more comfortable. The alien stared at Daeho like he was the most amazing thing it had ever seen. Then something even stranger happened. The leader of the Velthari delegation stood up slowly. Its body was shaking and its black eyes were very wide. It spoke in its musical voice, but the words were different from before. The translator said the alien was speaking in what humans would call a prayer or a sacred chant. The Velthari leader walked to where Daeho was standing, and then did something that shocked everyone. It knelt down and pressed its glass-like face to the floor. The other Velthari did the same thing. Then the Krex delegates dropped to their knees and bowed their massive heads. Even the Nexus aliens changed their shape to flow low against the ground. Hansol felt his heart beating very fast. Eugen's mouth fell open, and she could not speak. Dr. Mireille dropped her medical scanner. Deho looked around at all the aliens, bowing before him, and asked what was happening. The Velthari leader spoke from its position on the floor. It said that humans possessed something that was spoken of in the oldest stories of every race in the galaxy. It called this thing the gift, and said that no living species had ever shown it before. The alien said that helping another being without any hope of reward was impossible for every other race that had ever lived. Eugen found her voice and asked what the alien meant. The Krex leader lifted its heavy head and spoke in its grinding voice. It said that every action taken by every living thing was done for survival or advantage. Helping others was only done when it helped oneself, but humans helped others even when it cost them something and gave them nothing back. The Nexus Collective spoke in their flowing voice and said that their linked minds had searched all of galactic history. Never had any being acted with pure kindness like humans did naturally. They said humans did not even realize how special this was because to humans it felt normal. Hansol tried to understand what the aliens were saying. He asked if they meant that other species could not be kind to each other. The Velthari leader said that kindness always had a purpose for them. They might help their own families or their own species, but only because those beings were useful to them. They could not help strangers who offered no benefit. Dr. Mireille helped the sick Velthari to drink more water and asked if it felt better. The alien touched her hand gently and said that even now she was showing the gift again. She was caring for an alien she had just met, who could do nothing for her in return. The alien said this was like seeing a miracle. The aliens remained kneeling, even as the humans tried to get them to stand up. The Krex leader said that ancient prophecies spoke of a race that would return to guide the galaxy. This race would possess the gift and would unite all the scattered peoples of the stars. The leader said that humans were clearly this prophesied race. Eugen felt panic rising in her chest. She told the aliens that humans were not trying to guide anyone or unite anyone. They just wanted to explore space and make new friends. The humans had no interest in ruling over other species, but the aliens would not listen. They began speaking in their own languages to each other, and the translators picked up words that meant destiny and prophecy and salvation. The aliens seemed to believe that meeting humans was the most important thing that had ever happened to them. As the day continued, more alien ships arrived in human space. Word had somehow spread instantly across the galaxy that the prophesied race had finally appeared. Hansol watched the sensors as dozens, then hundreds of ships appeared around Jupiter. All of them were coming to see the humans who possessed the gift that made them kneel. Dr. Mireille sat in her laboratory aboard the research station orbiting Saturn and stared at the brain scans on her screen. For 3 months, she had been studying the neural patterns of 17 different alien species, and what she found made her feel sick. Every single alien brain was missing something that every human brain had naturally. The door to her lab opened, and Hyejin walked in carrying a cup of coffee for both of them. Hyejin was a cultural anthropologist who had been working with Mireille to understand why the aliens kept calling humans the prophesied race. The coffee was still hot, and Mireille wrapped her hands around the cup to warm them. The research station was always cold. Hyejin sat down and looked at the brain scans with Mireille. The alien brains were beautiful in their own way, but they were fundamentally different from human brains. Mireille pointed to a section of the scans and explained what she had discovered. The parts of the brain that humans used for empathy and selfless behavior were either tiny or completely missing in every alien species. The aliens literally could not feel what other beings felt. They could understand that others were in pain, but they did not feel that pain themselves. When humans saw someone suffering, they felt an automatic urge to help because their mirror neurons made them experience the suffering too. Aliens did not have these neurons working the same way. Hyejin pulled out her own research, which was just as disturbing. She had spent months studying the religious texts and ancient stories of dozens of alien civilizations. Every single culture had myths about a lost race called the Shepherds who possessed something called the Gift. These myths were thousands of years old and came from completely different parts of the galaxy. According to the stories, the Shepherds could perform impossible acts of kindness. They would sacrifice themselves for strangers and help enemies without seeking reward. The myth said that one day the Shepherds would return to unite the galaxy and bring peace to all the warring species. Most aliens had believed these were just fantasy stories until they met humans. Mirai and Hyojin were interrupted by an emergency alert. The communication system announced that all researchers should report to the main conference room immediately. Something important was happening on one of the alien worlds, and Earth Command wanted everyone to see it. The conference room was filled with scientists and diplomats watching a live transmission from the Krex homeworld. On the screen, they could see a city that was dying from some kind of plague. The buildings were empty and the streets were covered with the bodies of dead Krex. The few living Krex moved slowly, and their thick armor had turned a sickly gray color. The Krex had asked for human help, but their world was under strict quarantine. Any ship that landed there would not be allowed to leave because the plague was too dangerous. The Krex expected humans to send supplies and advice from a safe distance like any reasonable species would do, but Junho had volunteered to actually go down to the planet. He was a young aid worker who had spent years helping disaster victims on Earth. When he heard about the plague, he immediately said he would go to the surface and help the sick Krex personally. The human commanders had tried to stop him, but Junho insisted it was the right thing to do. Everyone in the conference room watched as Junho's small ship landed in the plague city. He wore a protective suit, but they all knew it might not be enough to keep him safe. The cameras followed him as he walked through the empty streets carrying medical supplies and food. His voice came through the speakers as he spoke to the few living Krex he found. Junho knelt beside a dying Krex warrior who was too weak to move. The warrior was 3 times bigger than Junho and could have easily killed him if it had been healthy. But Junho gently lifted the warrior's massive head and gave it water to drink. He spoke softly to the warrior in its own language, telling it that everything would be okay. The cameras showed Krex all over the city stopping to watch what Junho was doing. Even though they were sick and dying, they seemed amazed by his actions. The warrior that Junho was helping started to cry, which was something Krex never did in front of strangers. Tears ran down the warrior's armored face as Junho continued to care for it. Word of what Junho was doing spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours, every major alien civilization was broadcasting the footage of the young human risking his life to help dying enemies. The images were sent to billions of worlds and trillions of alien beings saw them. Mirai watched the screen and felt proud of Junho, but also terrified of what this would mean. She knew that the aliens would see this as final proof that humans were the mythical shepherds. The galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict. The first response came from the Velthari Empire. Their crystal ships appeared around the Krex homeworld and began sending medical supplies. But they did not do this because they cared about the Krex. They did it because they wanted to serve the humans who had shown them what true kindness looked like. The Velthari said they were honored to help the humans help others. Then, the Nexus Collective arrived with their flowing ships full of healing technology. They said their linked minds had been changed forever by seeing Junho's actions. For the first time in their species' history, they felt something like what humans called compassion. They wanted to learn more about this feeling by copying human behavior. More and more alien fleets arrived until the space around the Krex homeworld was filled with thousands of ships. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together because they all wanted to serve the humans. The plague that had been killing the Krex was cured within days because so many civilizations were sharing their knowledge and resources. But the real shock came when the aliens started arriving at Earth itself. The Sol system filled with so many ships that they blocked out the stars. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy came to see the homeworld of the shepherds. They brought gifts of technology and art and precious materials from their worlds. Hyojin received reports from Earth's surface that made her stomach hurt. Millions of aliens were requesting permission to land on Earth, just to walk on the same ground that humans walked on. They wanted to see where beings capable of true kindness came from. Some aliens were building shrines and temples dedicated to human compassion. The alien leaders sent messages to Earth's government asking for guidance on how to run their civilizations. They said that humans must know secrets about peace and happiness that other species had never learned. Wars that had lasted for thousands of years were ending because the alien leaders wanted to please the humans by being less violent. President Taeyeon appeared on every screen in the research station looking exhausted and worried. She announced that Earth was being overwhelmed by alien visitors and requests for help. The planet's resources were being stretched thin, trying to accommodate millions of alien pilgrims who wanted to experience human kindness firsthand. Mireille felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what was happening. The galaxy was not just respecting humans or admiring them. The aliens were becoming completely dependent on human guidance because they could not understand how to be truly good without human examples to copy. The worst part was that humans had never wanted this responsibility. They had just been acting naturally the way they always did. Helping others in need was as automatic for humans as breathing. They did not think of themselves as special or superior. They were just being human. But to the aliens, humans were living gods who possessed impossible powers. The gift of selfless compassion was so foreign to alien thinking that they could not imagine any being possessing it naturally. In their minds, humans must be divinely created or magically enhanced to be capable of such acts. Hyejin showed Mireille the latest reports from alien worlds. Entire civilizations were restructuring their societies to try to copy human behavior. They were writing new laws based on human ethics and changing their religions to worship human virtues. The galaxy was transforming itself to serve beings who had never asked to be served. As night fell on the research station, Mireille and Hyejin sat in the observation deck, looking out at the alien ships surrounding Saturn. The ships came from hundreds of different worlds, but they were all here for the same reason. They wanted to be close to humans and learn from them. Mireille wondered what would happen to humanity under this kind of pressure. Could humans remain human when an entire galaxy was watching their every move and copying their every action? Would the responsibility of being everyone's moral teachers change humans into something different? The questions had no easy answers, but one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same now that it had discovered the one species that could love strangers as much as they loved themselves. The age of human leadership had begun whether humans wanted it or not. Jinwoo sat in his small classroom in Seoul and looked at the empty desks where his students usually sat. It had been 6 months since the aliens declared humans to be the shepherds, and his students had not been in school for weeks. Their parents were too busy dealing with the millions of alien visitors who came to Earth every day, hoping to learn from human teachers. Outside his window, Jinwoo could see the massive alien ships floating in the sky above the city. The ships were beautiful, but they made him feel nervous. He was just a simple elementary school teacher who liked to help children learn about math and science. He had never wanted to be part of anything as big and important as what was happening to Earth. The door to his classroom opened, and 3 aliens walked in, followed by a human translator. The aliens were from different species, but they all moved, with the same careful reverence like they were entering a sacred temple. The translator explained that the aliens had traveled across the galaxy to observe a human teacher, because they wanted to understand how humans learn to be so kind. Jinwoo felt embarrassed, but he welcomed the aliens and offered them seats. The chairs were too small for the large Krex delegate, but it squeezed itself into one anyway. The Velthari representative stood gracefully beside its chair since sitting seemed uncomfortable for its crystalline body. The Nexus delegate simply flowed into the shape of a chair beside the desk. The translator told Jinwoo that these aliens were education ministers from their respective civilizations. They wanted to know how human children were taught to care about others and help strangers. They believed that if they could copy human teaching methods, they could make their own people more compassionate. Jinwoo did not know what to say because he had never thought of himself as teaching compassion. He just tried to be kind to his students and help them when they had problems. He told the aliens that human children learned kindness naturally by watching adults and by practicing caring for each other. The aliens asked many questions about human education. They wanted to know if there were special classes for teaching empathy, or specific exercises for developing altruism. Jin Woo explained that humans did not have classes like that because caring about others was something children learned by example, rather than instruction. As Jin Woo talked about his students, the aliens became more and more amazed. He told them about how his students would automatically help a classmate who dropped their books or comfort a friend who was crying. The children did these things without being told, because they felt bad when they saw others in trouble. The Krex. Delegate made rumbling sounds that the translator said meant it was confused. The alien asked how human children could feel the pain of others when pain was supposed to be private to each individual. Jinwoo tried to explain that humans naturally imagined what others were feeling and responded to that imagined pain as if it were their own. During lunchtime, Jinwoo unpacked the simple meal his wife had prepared for him. He had rice and vegetables and a small piece of fish. When he noticed that the aliens had not brought any food, he automatically offered to share his lunch with them. The translator warned him that the aliens had different dietary needs, but Jinwoo insisted they at least try something. The moment Jinwoo offered his food to the aliens, something extraordinary happened. All three delegates immediately prostrated themselves on the classroom floor and began speaking in what the translator said were prayers of gratitude. Jinwoo was horrified and begged them to get up, but they would not move. The Velthari delegate spoke in its musical voice and said that Jinwoo had just demonstrated the gift again. He had offered his own food to strangers who could give him nothing in return. The alien said this proved that humans were truly the divine shepherds spoken of in the ancient prophecies. Jinwoo tried to explain that sharing food was just normal human behavior, but the aliens would not listen. They said that for their species, sharing food with outsiders was impossible, unless there was some clear benefit to be gained. Food was a resource that should only go to family members or useful allies. The translator looked uncomfortable as he relayed the alien's words. He told Jinwoo that the three delegates wanted to broadcast his lunch sharing across the galaxy as an example of perfect shepherd behavior. They believed that showing this simple act of kindness would help inspire their own species to be more generous. Jinwoo felt panic rising in his chest as he realized what was happening. His simple act of sharing lunch was about to become a religious moment for billions of alien beings. He begged the aliens not to make a big deal out of something so ordinary, but they said it was their duty to share the miracle they had witnessed. Within hours, Jinwoo's face was being broadcast to every alien world in the galaxy. The footage of him offering his lunch to the delegates was shown over and over with commentary about how it demonstrated the infinite compassion of the shepherd race. Aliens across the cosmos were studying every detail of the video to try to understand the divine kindness of humans. President Tai-Yan called an emergency meeting of Earth's government to discuss what was happening. The planet was being overwhelmed by alien worship, and humans were struggling to cope with the pressure. Every human action was being watched and analyzed and turned into religious doctrine by species who had never experienced true altruism. So Young was a psychologist who had been studying the differences between human and alien brains since first contact. She presented her research to the emergency meeting and explained why humans were so different from every other known species. Human evolution had created brains that were uniquely capable of empathy and selfless behavior. The mirror neuron systems in human brains were much more developed than in any alien species. When humans saw others in pain, their brains automatically activated the same neural pathways as if they were experiencing the pain themselves. This made humans literally feel the suffering of others and drove them to help even when helping was costly or dangerous. So Young explained that alien brains had evolved differently because their environments had not rewarded altruistic behavior. Species that helped strangers at their own expense had been eliminated by natural selection on most worlds. Only humans had somehow developed in ways that made selfless kindness an advantage rather than a weakness. But now this difference was causing massive problems for both humans and aliens. The aliens had become so dependent on human guidance that they were not making any important decisions without consulting humans first. Wars had stopped not because aliens had learned to be peaceful, but because they were waiting for humans to tell them what to do. Meanwhile, humans were cracking under the pressure of being worshipped by an entire galaxy. Many humans were becoming afraid to act naturally because they knew millions of aliens were watching and copying everything they did. Some humans had stopped helping others because they were tired of every kind gesture being turned into a religious ceremony. The worst problem was with a group of humans led by someone named Kyung-min, who wanted to use humanity's new status to gain power over the galaxy. Kyung-min argued that if aliens insisted on treating humans as gods, then humans should accept that role and use it to improve the universe according to human values. Kyung-min gathered followers who believed that humans had a responsibility to rule the galaxy since they were the only species capable of true moral reasoning. This group started making demands of alien governments and threatening to withdraw human guidance from civilizations that did not obey human commands. But most humans were horrified by Kyung-min's approach. They organized quickly to stop the human supremacist movement before it could cause serious damage. Human volunteers worked tirelessly to explain to aliens that Kyung-min did not represent humanity and that real humans would never want to exploit others. The aliens watched in amazement as humans fought among themselves to prevent some humans from abusing power over other species. This was another impossible demonstration of the gift because it showed humans caring more about the welfare of aliens than about their own potential advantages. The incident with Kyung-min actually strengthened alien faith in human virtue because it proved that humans would police themselves to protect others. No other species had ever seen anything like humans preventing members of their own species from gaining power, when that power was freely offered. As Earth struggled with its new role as the spiritual center of the galaxy, Jin-Woo continued teaching in his small classroom. He tried to act normally despite knowing that everything he did was being watched and recorded by alien observers. He still shared his lunch with visitors and he still helped his students with their problems. But Jin-Woo worried about what would happen to humanity under this kind of constant scrutiny. Could humans remain human when they knew that every gesture of kindness would be turned into galactic doctrine? Would the pressure of being perfect moral examples eventually change humans into something they were not meant to be? The questions haunted Jin-Woo as he looked out at the alien ships filling Earth's sky. Somewhere among those ships were beings who had traveled incredible distances just to watch him eat lunch and see how a human teacher treated his students. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Jin-Woo knew he had to keep being himself because that was what the galaxy needed most. Hae-won stood at the edge of the massive excavation site and stared down into the ancient ruins that her team had discovered. The structures were older than any civilization currently alive in the galaxy, and they were clearly built by beings with technology far beyond what anyone possessed today. But the most disturbing thing about the ruins was how familiar they looked. The architecture was designed for beings who were roughly human-sized and shaped. The doorways were the right height for humans, and the furniture that remained was clearly meant for creatures with human proportions. Hae-won felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what this meant. Humans were not the first species to possess the gift. Woo Jin climbed up from the excavation carrying a data tablet filled with quantum archaeological scans. He was the best quantum archaeologist in the galaxy and had been working for months to extract information from the ancient ruins. His face was pale and his hands were shaking as he showed Hae-won what he had discovered. The ruins contained quantum echoes of the beings who had lived there millions of years ago. These echoes were like ghostly recordings that showed how the ancient people had behaved and interacted with each other. Woo Jin had spent weeks analyzing the data, and what he found was both wonderful and terrifying. The ancient beings had possessed the same gift that humans had. They helped strangers without expecting rewards, and they sacrificed themselves for others even when it cost them everything. They were kind and compassionate in ways that other species found impossible to understand. They were the original shepherds that all the galactic myths spoke about. But the quantum echoes also showed how the ancient shepherds had died. Other species in the galaxy had eventually decided that beings capable of true altruism were too dangerous to be allowed to live. The altruistic behavior of the shepherds made other species feel inferior and threatened. Wars had been fought to eliminate the shepherds before they could change the natural order of the galaxy. Hae-won felt sick as she read through Woo Jin's data. The same aliens who now worshipped humans had once destroyed the original shepherds because they could not accept that true goodness was possible. The galaxy had spent millions of years regretting that decision and creating myths about the lost race. But when the shepherds had actually existed, they had been seen as a threat. The excavation site was suddenly filled with alarms as ancient defense systems activated throughout the ruins. Lights that had been dark for millions of years began to glow, and mechanical sounds echoed from deep underground. Something had been waiting in the ruins for beings like humans to return, and now it was waking up. Hei-Wan and Wu-Jin ran toward their shuttle but found their path blocked by energy barriers that appeared from nowhere. All around the excavation site, members of their team were trapped by the same barriers. The ancient defense system had activated to prevent anyone from leaving until some kind of test was completed. Min-Su was a young cadet who had volunteered to join the expedition even though he was barely out of training. He was trapped near the main ruins along with Yunji, who was a diplomatic aide from the Council of Unity. Both of them were scared, but they tried to stay calm as strange machines emerged from the ancient structures. The machines looked like floating crystals that pulsed. With internal light, they spoke in voices that sounded like the wind through empty caves. The translation system struggled to convert their ancient language, but eventually words appeared on everyone's communication devices. The machines announced that they were conducting the final test of the shepherds. According to the machines, the original shepherds had programmed them to activate if beings claiming to possess the gift ever returned to the galaxy. The test was designed to determine if the new claimants were truly capable of perfect altruism, or if they were just another species pretending to be good for their own benefit. The test began immediately, and it was more terrible than anything Hei-Wan had imagined. The machines created scenarios where helping others would result in certain death for the helper. They presented situations where saving alien lives would cost human lives, and where showing mercy would lead to great suffering. The first test involved Yunji and a group of alien delegates who had come to observe the excavation. The machines created a collapsing structure that would crush the aliens unless someone held up the falling beams. But holding the beams would require a person to stay in position until they were crushed themselves. There was no way to save the aliens without dying. Yunji did not hesitate for even a moment. She ran into the collapsing structure and braced herself against the falling beams. Her small body shook with the effort of holding up the massive weight, but she stayed in position even as cracks appeared in the concrete above her head. She called out to the aliens to run to safety while they still had time. The aliens stared at Yunji in amazement as she sacrificed herself to save them. They had witnessed human altruism many times before, but seeing someone actually die for strangers was still shocking to them. The machines recorded every detail of Yunji's choice, and the data flowed into their ancient analysis systems. Min-Su faced his own test when the machines presented him with a scenario involving a plague that would kill millions of aliens unless someone carried the cure into the infected area. The carrier would be exposed to the plague and would certainly die, but their sacrifice would save countless lives. Again, there was no possibility of survival for the helper. Min-Su grabbed the cure without asking any questions about his own safety. He ran toward the infected area, even as the machines warned him that exposure meant certain death. He called back to the other humans that saving lives was more important than his own survival. His young face was determined and unafraid as he disappeared into the plague zone. One by one, the machines tested every human at the excavation site. Each test required the ultimate sacrifice, and each human made that sacrifice without hesitation. They gave their lives for aliens they barely knew, and for people they had never met. The humans seemed to consider this behavior completely normal, even though it meant their deaths. Hei-Wan was the last to be tested, and her scenario was the most difficult of all. The machines offered her a choice between saving her own research team or saving a group of alien prisoners from a species that had historically been hostile to humans. She could not save both groups, and whichever group she chose to abandon would die horribly. Hei-Wan looked at her human colleagues who had worked with her for years, and then looked at the alien prisoners who had done nothing wrong except belong to an enemy species. She made her choice quickly and ran toward the alien prisoners. She could not let innocent beings die just because their government had been hostile to humans. As Hei-Wan worked to free the alien prisoners, she heard her human teammates cheering her decision. They understood why she had chosen to save their enemies rather than themselves. They were proud of her for making the truly moral choice, even though it meant their deaths. This was what humans did when faced with impossible decisions. The ancient machines suddenly stopped their tests and the deadly scenarios disappeared like they had never existed. The energy barriers vanished and the mechanical sounds faded into silence. Holographic displays appeared showing the faces of the long-dead shepherds who had programmed the tests millions of years ago. The original shepherds spoke through their ancient recordings and congratulated humans for proving that the gift had returned to the galaxy. They explained that they had been destroyed by species who could not understand altruism, but they had hidden technology and knowledge that would help the new shepherds avoid the same fate. The technology that the shepherds revealed was beyond anything that existed in the current galaxy. They had developed ways to enhance empathy in other species and methods for teaching true compassion to beings whose brains were not naturally capable of it. Most importantly, they had discovered ways to protect altruistic species from those who would destroy them out of fear or jealousy. But the technology came with a terrible responsibility. The humans who had passed the test were now the guardians of this ancient knowledge, and they would have to decide how to use it. They could try to change the galaxy by forcing other species to become more compassionate, or they could find gentler ways to spread the gift without imposing it on unwilling beings. HFY realized that humanity now faced the same choice that had ultimately destroyed the original shepherds. They could use their power to transform the galaxy according to their values, or they could try to guide other species toward finding their own paths to compassion. The decision they made would determine whether humans survived their role as the galaxy's moral teachers. As the ancient ruins powered down and returned to silence, HFY looked at her surviving team members. They had all been willing to die for strangers and aliens without hesitation. They had proven beyond any doubt that humans possessed the gift that made the galaxy kneel before them. But now they had to prove something even more difficult. They had to show that possessing ultimate moral authority did not mean using it to control others. The real test of the shepherds was not whether they could sacrifice themselves for others, but whether they could resist the temptation to force their goodness on the entire galaxy. Sang-hyun sat in the massive conference chamber that had been built to accommodate delegates from every known species in the galaxy, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. As the first human galactic coordinator, he was supposed to provide moral guidance to trillions of beings across thousands of worlds, but he felt like he was drowning in problems he never should have had to solve. On the screens around him were the faces of alien leaders asking for human advice on everything, from trade disputes to personal relationships. The Velthari wanted to know if it was morally acceptable to mine asteroids that might have microscopic life on them. The Kreks needed guidance on whether their traditional warrior culture was compatible with human values of compassion. The Nexus Collective was asking for help understanding individual identity, since their linked minds had started experiencing human-style empathy. Every decision that Sang-hyun made would affect billions of lives and shape the future of entire civilizations. The aliens had become completely dependent on human moral guidance because they believed their own ethical systems were inferior to human compassion. Wars had stopped and conflicts had ended, but only because everyone was waiting for humans to tell them what to do. Young-suk entered the chamber carrying a tablet full of research data that made Sang-hyun's stomach hurt just to look at it. She was a philosopher who had been studying the effects of human leadership on galactic civilization, and her conclusions were disturbing. The galaxy was slowly losing its ability to make moral decisions without human guidance. Young-suk showed Sang-hyun examples of alien species that had completely abandoned their own ethical traditions in favor of copying human behavior. The Velthari had stopped their traditional crystal singing ceremonies because humans did not have similar rituals, and they thought human customs must be superior. The Kreks had given up their honor codes because human morality seemed more compassionate. The most troubling example was a species called the Thalari, who had traditionally been peaceful farmers. After meeting humans, they decided that their simple agricultural lifestyle was inferior to human complexity. They abandoned their farms and tried to build cities like human cities and live lives like human lives. The result was chaos and starvation, because they were not suited for the lifestyle they were trying to copy. Dong Hyun was a former merchant who had become an expert on galactic economics since first contact. He brought reports that showed how alien civilizations were restructuring their entire economies to please humans. Species were abandoning profitable industries because they thought humans might not approve of them. Others were wasting resources on projects they believed would impress their human guides. The economic disruption was causing suffering across the galaxy, but the aliens would not listen to human advice to return to their traditional ways. They believed that anything humans suggested must be a test of their dedication to shepherd values. If humans told them to go back to their old customs, the aliens assumed this meant they should work even harder to become more human-like. Sang Hyun felt overwhelmed by the impossible situation humanity had found itself in. Humans had never wanted to rule the galaxy or guide other species. They had just been acting naturally according to their evolved capacity for empathy and altruism. But their natural behavior had been so foreign to other species that it was interpreted as divine wisdom. The emergency alarms suddenly filled the chamber with their harsh sound, and Sang Hyun's assistants rushed in with reports of a new crisis. Long-range sensors had detected ships approaching from outside the galaxy, and these ships were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They seemed to be made of pure darkness, and they absorbed energy from everything they came near. Bo-Ram was a strategic commander who had been monitoring the galactic defense networks since the ancient shepherd ruins had been discovered. She brought data showing that the approaching ships belonged to something called the Void Seekers, who came from the space between galaxies. According to the ancient shepherd records, the Void Seekers fed on empathic energy and altruistic emotions. The original shepherds had encountered the Void Seekers millions of years ago and had barely survived the conflict. The Void Seekers were drawn to species capable of true altruism because they could drain the empathic energy from those species to sustain themselves. They had been hunting for the gift across the universe for eons, and now they had found humans. Bo-Ram explained that the Void Seekers did not just kill their prey. They drained the capacity for empathy and compassion from entire species, leaving them as empty shells incapable of caring about anything. The ancient shepherds had hidden themselves to avoid this fate, but their concealment had ultimately led to their destruction by other galactic species who feared them. The approaching Void Seeker fleet was massive, and their ships seemed to bend space around them in unnatural ways. Early probe contacts showed that just being near the Void Seekers caused empathic species to lose their ability to feel compassion. Humans who got too close to the ships reported feeling emotionally numb and unable to care about the suffering of others. Sang Hyun realized that this was the ultimate test of everything humans had tried to build in the galaxy. The Void Seekers threatened not just humanity, but every species that humans had influenced toward greater compassion. If the Void Seekers succeeded, they would drain the empathy from the entire galaxy and leave it as cold and lifeless as the space between stars. The only way to fight the Void Seekers was to find a way to make other species capable of generating their own altruistic energy, instead of depending on humans to provide it. But this seemed impossible because alien brains were fundamentally different from human brains. They lacked the neural structures necessary for true empathy and selfless behavior. Seok Jin was a neuroscientist who had been working with a team of volunteers to find solutions to the Void Seeker threat. He proposed a desperate plan that might give other species the capacity for human-style empathy. Using technology from the ancient shepherd ruins, they could temporarily link human consciousness with alien minds and share the neural patterns that made humans capable of altruism. The process would be incredibly dangerous for the human volunteers because linking consciousness with alien minds might damage or destroy their own empathic abilities. The humans who participated might lose their own capacity for compassion in order to give that capacity to others. It was the ultimate sacrifice that only humans would even consider making. Seok Jin gathered a team of human volunteers who were willing to risk their lives and their humanity to save the galaxy from the Void Seekers. The volunteers included people from every profession and background who understood that this might be the last truly human thing they would ever do. They prepared for the consciousness linking procedure, knowing they might not survive it. The linking process began as the Void Seeker fleet entered the outer regions of the galaxy. Human volunteers connected their minds to alien leaders from dozens of species and began sharing the neural patterns that made empathy possible. The pain was incredible as human consciousness merged with fundamentally different alien thought processes. But slowly, something miraculous began to happen. Alien minds that had never experienced true empathy began to feel what humans felt when they saw others suffering. For the first time in their species' evolution, they felt the automatic urge to help others even when helping provided no benefit to themselves. They were experiencing the gift directly instead of just observing it in humans. The transformation spread from the linked alien leaders to their populations as the new empathic patterns were shared through their various communication networks. Species that had depended on human guidance for years suddenly understood what it meant to feel genuine compassion. They no longer needed humans to tell them how to be good because they could feel goodness themselves. As more and more alien species developed their own capacity for altruism, the galaxy itself began to generate the empathic energy that the Void Seekers fed on. But instead of being drained by the Void Seekers, this energy seemed to overwhelm them. The Void Seekers had evolved to consume the empathy of single species, but they could not handle the combined altruistic output of an entire galaxy. The Void Seeker ships began to retreat as they were overwhelmed by the massive outpouring of compassionate energy from billions of newly empathic beings. Their dark hulls cracked, and their energy-draining weapons failed as they were flooded with more altruistic emotion than they could process. The threat that had destroyed the original shepherds was defeated by the very gift that humans had shared with the galaxy. In the aftermath of the Void Seeker retreat, Sang-hyun found himself in a very different galaxy than the one he had been trying to govern. The alien species no longer needed human guidance because they could make their own moral decisions based on their newly developed capacity for empathy. Wars and conflicts were ending not because humans ordered it, but because aliens could now feel the pain of their enemies. Ji-hai was an elderly former ambassador who had lived through the entire transformation of the galaxy, from first contact to the defeat of the Void Seekers.